Hey, folks, and welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me, a show where I and my mustache get to interview some of the power players of the San Antonio improv community, of the Texas improv community at large, and the entire country's improv community. Today's show is about support in improv. And I want to go ahead and bring up my middle square, my first panelist, Tina Jackson. Would you please join us?
You got it, man.
Tina, I don't know anything about you. Tell me something.
Bullshit. Hi, what's up?
Hey.
I am the owner and operator of Bexar Stage in San Antonio, Texas. I've been improvising for about 20 years. I specialize in relationship-based improv, which is not entirely what we're talking about today, but not unentirely what we're talking about, because all improv is relationship-based if you're doing it right.
So do you know anything about support?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. All right, I'll get back to you then.
Yeah, see you soon.
My next guest is Angelica Lucio. Angelica, would you please join us?
Hello, hello.
There's something behind you.
Oh no! If you don't move, he can't see you.
Oh my God. Everybody knows that from Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Park 1993.
Angelica, can you give us a little bit of background as far as how long you've been doing improv and where you've been doing improv?
I started dabbling in improv in like 2012, 2013, where I took my first class. Yeah. And then got into it more regularly, probably in like 2014, 2015. I have taken, at the time, like all the classes available in San Antonio. I'm pretty much, I think, caught up. Unless someone wants to offer.
Checked all the boxes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do in Key Party over at Bexar Stage, and then I play in the Denials for some short form action.
Denials, right? And what theater is the Denials at?
Yield Overtime.
At the Overtime, our wonderful little nonprofit.
Little nonprofit here in San Antonio. Angelica, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to get back to you in a second. But next, I want to introduce my next panelist, Brian Scribner. Would you and your beard get out here? Oh, God.
Honestly, I miss him so much, but don't tell him. It'll go straight to his beard.
And I missed that. Like, what is that? 32 ounces? 64 ounces?
64.
How big is that thing?
It's a big one. It's a big one.
Just enough.
Oh, God. Brian, this isn't your first time on the show, but give our viewers a reminder of your improv experience and your experience teaching. What's this all about, man?
My improv experience, I've been doing improv since 1736. I was one of the first ever improvisers. I was actually
you're white, so that makes sense.
I was an actor, and I just forgot my lines, and I just kind of made them up, and suddenly, poof, improv was invented, and then it got forgotten for a very long time, and then other people took credit for it later on.
You.
Yeah, it's okay. So now I've been doing improv for quite a while. I've been doing theater for quite a while as well. And I teach improv at Bexar Stage in normal human times. Yes, and that's it. I actually had a bright pupil, a wonderful student that has risen to such great heights. Rick, you might know him.
Is it Tyler?
Yes, it's Tyler.
Oh, no.
I'm just kidding. I hate Tyler. Rick's great.
Yes, thank you.
That's for you, Tyler.
This is
like, why haven't I gotten a shout out on the show? And I was like, here it comes. Next time I have the opportunity.
Tyler doesn't have technology or social media. He's never seen this.
No, he
just
doesn't
got an
understand
Instagram. Don't tell anyone.
He doesn't get it. Yeah. All right. Brian, thank you for being on the show. I'm going to get back to you in a second. But right now, Tina, would you start us off? What are we talking about when we improvisers talk about support in improv?
Support is a big term in improv, and it covers a lot of bases. So it can mean a lot of different things, right? Supporting an improv scene generally can come, I mean, it comes in a lot of, like I said, a lot of ways, shapes, and fashion. One way you can support is by stepping out on stage with somebody when they step out on stage with an initiation line, to just go out there and say, whatever your initiation line is, I'm there with you. I don't know what it is yet. I don't necessarily have an idea for the scene, but I'm here to support whatever your initiation is by saying yes and to it. So that's one way to support. We've got backline support as far as like adding environment noises or pitter pats or radio signal. We've got supporting audience interaction, whether that means supporting the audience member or whether they're on stage doing improv set or while you're asking for a suggestion. You can support by adding a walk-on to a scene. There's like a million different ways to support, and that's probably just only 4 of them. But supporting an improv scene is like one of our major jobs as improvisers.
So the common thread here, would you say that support is when you're helping your scene partner and helping the scene moving forward, or just in general?
Yeah, you're supporting what's already been said by adding to it.
Yeah.
So it's a very and part of the yes and is I see what you're doing, I agree to it, it's the yes, and I'm adding to it in some way, shape, or fashion to support what's already been said.
Yeah, okay. Angelica, so you, Tina and Brian are in a performance at Bexar Stage that happens once a week, not during quarantine, but in the past has, and it's called Key Party. And the format for this is what's called a living room. And we were talking before the show, we were talking before the show about how support is so important in this format. And Angelica, could you talk to us more about how you support your scene partners in Key Party and how they support you?
Yeah, I think one way I always have the misconception thrown on me that improv is like stand-up, right? Yes, you do stand-up thing, and I'm like, no. And so I always think of the way I explain it is I'm like, it's a team sport, improv is, and we're all a team, and it's important that when you go out on stage and you feel like the people that are there with you, they do have your back, right? And so I want to be, when I'm on the back line, I want to make sure I'm paying attention and I can contribute something that's going to, like you said, move things along. So I'm watching and I'm like, okay, what can I do to reinforce what has been said, right? To help bring home the point of somebody's initiation. And so I think that's a big piece of being supportive. Like, okay, so this person threw that out there. It's maybe hasn't landed as hard as it could. What can I do to help get that idea going and like, blossoming into something?
Yeah, helping to reinforce your scene partner's point, the idea that they're trying to get across there. And you mentioned the team sports. It reminds me of volleyball. I'm not even a good volleyball player, but I know that the image of the person throwing the volleyball up straight up and then allowing somebody else, putting it in position for somebody else to come and kick it over the net. Not not kick.
Kicking is not part of volleyball.
That doesn't happen in volleyball.
No, you don't kick the volleyball.
It's strictly actually forbidden.
Whatever.
I think you do if you're not coordinated and you go to pick it up and you snap and you accidentally. I mean, you might kick it then.
Okay, the point is that you put the ball somewhere for your volleyball teammate to make it.
I use the analogy when I'm teaching. It is a volleyball analogy. You're close, but you're so far off. I'm going to correct you. It's in volleyball. In my PE class, I was taught bump, set, spike. Those are the you bump it to get it up in the air. You set it for the spiker right by the net, and then the spiker is the one who like hits it with the part of their hand, this part of their hand, whatever this is. What's this? The ball of your hand? Doesn't matter. Hits it over the net. And sometimes that person is the star of the team somehow, right? The person who strikes the ball over the net maybe scores the point. But the people who bump and set are just as important because the ball doesn't get in the air for that spike moment, for that sort of the joke, the punchline, the funny moment of the scene without the support. And that's what makes improv more of a team thing is how many times can I throw the ball up in the air for you to absolutely take it and be like, I see exactly where you're going and I know exactly what to do with it. And I can make the joke because you gave me all the ammunition for it.
Okay, so Brian, Angelica gave us that example of helping to drive home the point of a scene partner that a scene partner lays up in a scene. Give us another example of how you have supported your scene partners or how you like to support your scene partners, and do it with a sports analogy.
With a sports analogy. Sometimes, yes, here we are. Sometimes being support means helping, rescuing, saving, jumping in and realizing that someone is floundering in a situation. You're going to come in and you're going to help them. You're going to assist them. You'll do it by, heightening the scene, changing things up, making sense of what they have already put out there. There's a ton of different ways to assist, to help, to be a, almost a life preserver of a scene, to, do something like that. That's my favorite thing to do, is to come out and see people dig themselves in holes and then figure out a way to come out and throw the rope down or jump right in the hole with them and just help them dig along so it makes more sense.
Brian, you're one of my very favorite supportive improvisers to watch, honestly. It's part of the reason that we decided that you should be on the show today. But one of the things I see you do a lot is that sort of like hanging back and not necessarily putting yourself right in front all the time, but being able to step back and watch and really find where you're needed, where you're necessary, what you can do to help untangle a scene or make sense of something that has, scene person one says something, scene person two says something, and they're very unrelated, and you find a way to somehow marry them. And it's really, really fun to watch from the audience. And you know how much I love giving you compliments. So that one's earned.
That was the fourth one ever.
That you've ever received by anyone, or from Tina?
Just from Tina. Fourth compliment I've ever received from Tina. And this one's actually recorded. So now there's proof. Now I can be like,
everybody says something nice. That's actually better for me than it is for you.
I imagine after the show, Brian's just going to replay that like 10 seconds over
we'll
and
make
over.
It a highlight clip so we can watch it over and over again.
That's going to be his ringtone. What do you mean?
Brian, you're one of my favorite.
The sports analogy. So the sports analogy for that would be, for just support in general, is that, people remember, as far as baseball players go, people remember the guys that hit all the home runs. They remember Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa battling it out one year to see who's going to hit more home runs. They remember, these guys that are just crushing the ball over the fence and everything. My favorite baseball player of all time is Tony Gwynn. He played for the San Diego Padres. He never hit more than 19, 20 home runs a year. But he batted higher than anyone else in the league almost every single year, because he went out and just did what he needed to do to get on base, to let other people do more, hit the home runs, do all these things. There was one year he went up to bat, and he was up to bat almost 600 times that year, and he struck out 19 times total all year long. Whereas most guys strike out 100, 200, 300 times a year.
Because they're swinging for the fences.
Because they're going for it all. And Tony Gwynn was like, I'm going to be a team player. I'm going to just come out there and do what I need to do to advance our team, to make our team better. And,
honestly, a very good sports analogy.
It is.
I was hoping for a baseball one, yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. I like that.
I've had that one pocketed for quite a while.
Well, I'm glad it came into play.
Yeah.
Today. What an honor.
So I want to get a little bit deeper in y'all's head, though, because like Tina said, Brian, you're a fantastic supporter on stage. And Angelica, we brought you on the show for the exact same reason. Yeah. So Angelica, what is it that makes you so good at supporting your teammates, as you put it, up on stage? And specifically, I want to know, do you have a sense of responsibility to them to help them out when you're performing with them?
I think we all have a sense of responsibility to each other, right? Because there's that trust factor, right? We're all in this together. So yeah, I do feel a sense of, okay, what can I do to help this? What can I do to add to it if that's what's needed? I think a lot of times what happens is, in my imagination, I'm like, and I've heard this from more than one teacher, is if this is true, in this world, then what else is true, right? And if there's something going on, then if I can make that a little bit more real by adding a piece to it, then I'm gonna absolutely do that.
And Angelica, in one of our last key parties, and I say last, not meaning that we have done our final key party, but our final key party perhaps for the year, somewhere back in March, we did a show, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the scene was, and I don't remember the meat of the scene. It does not matter. I was in the I was in the foreground of the scene, having the scene with somebody. But I remember you in the background, not saying a single word the entire scene, but adding to the environment so much. I feel like we were in a jail. Do you remember this? But you like sat in the back for the whole scene, just like maybe sharpening something or like just reading a book kind of. And like, I remember so vividly that I was like, I felt very, but I remember feeling like sometimes when somebody walks on stage with you, that you sort of feel like, oh shit, I have to justify who this person is. I have to address them, or I have to name them or call them the waiter, or, you know, like they're waiting for me to do something for them. But you looked so cool, so calm, so confident, just adding environment and sitting in the background, being silent and just like adding to the space, that I was like, oh, Angelica does not need me right now. She is doing this for us to like support. Like, it was such a cool supportive move, and it made me feel, and I know it was a jail scene now. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Somebody was visiting you.
Yeah, somebody was visiting
your cellmate.
Yeah, somebody was visiting me in jail, and you were like just in the background, just being my cellmate, I think. And I appreciated so much that I was like, oh, I don't have to do shit. Like, Angelica's got this. Like, you looked so confident that I was like, oh, she's doing this for me, not I have to do anything for her. Like, it was such a cool moment to be like, oh, I can focus on my scene now, because whatever I'm doing, Angelica's backing me up by just like adding to the environment of it. And I remember that moment clearly, not clearly enough to remember the meat of the scene. What I was doing was less important to me, but I felt I was very impressed with you just sitting back there and being absolutely okay with not taking the focus, but really adding to the environment. I think that's one really cool way that you can support your teammates, is by if you're at a mall, just being a mall walker, just like adding, you know, just like showing up and like adding to the environment, or being the perfume spritzer does not mean your perfume spritzer has to be the character. It's adding to the mall. Like, what do you find at the mall?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Because we're on a blank canvas, right? When we're up there, we got a couple chairs, maybe, you know.
That's it. We got doors and chairs. That's about it.
Yeah. So I think that somebody, like, when you think about how you can support a scene, it could just be adding, you know, I'm basically in that scene, I was the plant, right? Like, I'm sitting in the back, just being there. And I think that's important, because it brings to life what's happening, what someone's initiation is, what somebody's idea is.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because it wasn't that long ago that I was a total newbie improviser. In fact, I've only been doing improv for about 1.5 years or 2 years now. And I know the loneliness that an improviser feels when you walk up on stage to start a scene and there's nobody out there with you, and everything rests on your shoulders. So for someone like Angelica to jump in and do something, be out there with me, and so I don't feel so alone out there, that is an incredible way to support. Something I want to say about what Brian mentioned earlier, he mentioned the word rescue. I've certainly known that feeling. I think that I may have rescued a few scenes in my experience, and I certainly know that I have been rescued on multiple occasions. There's one example, Brian, we were talking about before the show, I want to mention.
Oh,
this happened. Sure. Yeah, this happened during Key Party, and it was such a fantastic learning experience.
It's a case study that we'll use for years.
Yeah, absolutely. There was for this Key Party again, an audience member is pulled from the audience and remains on stage throughout the entire show. They have a conversation with the performers, and then based on that conversation, improv scenes happen, go swipe, 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 and then more conversation with the audience member.
Right, we continuously go back to the wall and speak to the audience member about more experiences that we can use as inspiration for our scene work.
Tina, Angelica, and Brian were in this particular show, and this particular audience member was asked some questions, and said some racially insensitive comments up on stage. And it really took all of the performers by surprise. So much so that nobody immediately knew how to react to that.
We walked into it pretty blindly.
Yeah.
And I asked the question and I did not expect the answer that I received.
And so it was obviously something that couldn't be quickly dealt with. Many of the performers sort of meandered off and evaporated to the back of the stage. Brian, you knew immediately what your job was to do at this moment. Do you want to describe that?
I think it's been I've been labeled a sponge for audience hate.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
By the aforementioned person that I hate, which is Tyler. There's a second shout out. I partially knew what this person was attempting to say. And two, I realized that, again, they had just dug a hole, jumped in it, poured some gasoline on themselves, and they had a match. And I was just watching, and I'm like, somebody has to jump in and help. And again, in my whatever warped brain, I thought, I'll be that guy. Why not? So I wandered over and I attempted to assist and help. And then one by one, I watched the other key party performers just walk backstage.
I called them to do. I tapped everybody and I was like,
which was fantastic, because I was like, okay, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to leave both of us out here for a very long time, or they're going to support us and they're going to come out and they're going to fix things and make things better. And all I have to do is bide time, ramble on about nothing, make this so this one person isn't out here by themselves, sucking up all the audience hatred alone, and I can just be here and be that person that's like, okay, so what you're saying is I think the point you're trying to make is
right. So while Brian is supporting the audience member in this moment, my move was to get the cast on board with something totally separate that obviously is going to tell the audience that this information that we are supposed to use for, inspiration for our scenes, this is not the information we're going to use. This is not something that we are going to take and just try to make ugly comedy out of. That this is something like our job in that moment was twofold. One was when I saw Brian step up, I knew here comes another compliment, Brian. I knew that moment was going to be safe with Brian because Brian, yeah, you're out to 5. I knew that moment was going to be safe with Brian to a point, but not for long because there's only so much audience sponging that you can do. Yeah. So I knew somebody had to take care of the audience member, which was what Brian stepped up to do. And somebody had to take care of the cast and the audience to make sure that the next moment had nothing to do with this kind of hanky audience feeling, right? Because the tone of the room shifted, right? Do you remember that, Angelica? The room like sort of that eek moment.
Yeah.
Oh, there was audible like
audible. Yeah, it was uncomfortable. Yes. I think the audience member just did not have the same awareness that we did in that moment. He didn't think what he had said had been that.
He's very young. Let's just also mention he was a very young person.
It's fine. It's one of the risks we take into consideration when we have an audience participant in our show, right? This is not somebody who's trained in improv. This is not somebody that we vouch for that says this is a Bear Stage show and a Bear Stage performer. We're not necessarily taking credit for this person, but we do have a responsibility to take care of them when they're on our stage. So while Brian's taking care of that audience member in particular, that the cast then had the opportunity to go backstage, and I said, whatever we do next has nothing to do with that. And we busted through one of the doors and we started something completely new, something completely different. I think even my initiation line was like, well, this is something completely different, because I wanted to tell the audience and simultaneously the cast that we were never going to go there. We're not going to touch it. We're not, I want to tell the audience that happened. We're moving on. That's not our moment, and we're not going to seize it as an opportunity for us to
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is like even the perfect way to react to this. It was our instantaneous reaction is what Brian and I essentially decided to do in that moment. Was that Brian stepped up and I saw him step up, so I was able to step back and create the next moment to make sure that the audience was taken care of. But that was all done without communication between me and Brian in particular.
Yeah, there was support for the person who said something that just was
Off
dumb.
base. Yeah.
And then there was support by the rest of the cast for the two people that were left out there on stage, just attempting to figure out how to move on from this situation.
Yeah. So,
and to be clear, I was in the audience watching all of this go on. Now, a few things that I want to underscore here is how Angelica, I talked to you a little bit earlier about responsibility, and Tina and Brian, what I really want to say here is how fantastic it was as an audience member, seeing that this audience member that was brought up on stage who said something incredibly off color, inappropriate, yet you guys continued to support him. You didn't kick him off the stage. You didn't shout at him and say, "Get out of this building." No, you recognized that you brought him up there and it was your responsibility to take care of him. You still had to have his back. And I think that's a wonderful thing that you guys showed the audience as you were making those corrections.
Right. And I want to be clear is I don't know that was even the perfect way to handle it, honestly. It was our instantaneous reaction, and we have talked about it many times since then. And I don't know if it happened again, if we'd handle it exactly the same way. So I don't want like all the kudos in the world or the, back patting and whatnot, because I don't think we, saved improv in that moment. But I do think we made our best attempt at supporting everyone in that moment.
I think.
Go ahead, Angelica.
I think that I agree with you. I'm not sure it was the best way to handle it, but it's one of those things where it's in the moment. Yeah. And I think at the core of it all was remembering that we are there to support each other. We do have to support that member of the audience. We do have to support the member of the cast who said, "Okay, I'll fall on the sword, and try to do what I can." I think going into whatever action happens with those things in mind, it's always going to be like the best that you can do at that time, right? If you just remember, these are the reasons, like this is what's the word I'm looking for? This is my goal, is to support this, right? Because after that show, we still have many other shows, and we want to make sure that our audience members know, okay, if you come up here, you are supported. We're going to take care of you as best we can. I think keeping those things in mind when you make the decisions are pretty paramount to a successful outcome, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think, certainly we've simplified a little bit today as far as like what all could have been done or said or done. So, and this isn't like a deep dive into that particular moment. Like I said, I think I'm happy with what we did, but I don't think it was the perfect outcome, because I do think there are probably other ways to do it. But in the moment, that was the solution in my mind. When I saw that, when I saw Brian's move, I thought, how do I support Brian right now? I'm going to change the moment as soon as I possibly can. And so I gathered the team and we bust through the door and we started something completely different to get Brian out of there as quickly as possible. So I don't think it was perfect, but I think in the moment it was best case scenario. Mm-hmm. And if we had to do over again, and that's what we've talked about. That's why this is a Bear Stage case study, is like, what do we do in these types of situations? What is the best way to handle that? And that's something right before quarantine started was in key party rehearsals, we talked a lot about, and we didn't really come up with maybe even the best way, but we came up with several ways that we could support those moments in the future. And some of that talk was because we do have the wild card idea of having the audience member on stage with us the whole show. And so in that, there's, it's not a conversation you have ahead of time. We draw the key at the top of the show, the audience member joins us. We don't have time to say, okay, and by the way, here's our HR policy. Here are all the things that we think are appropriate and inappropriate to cover on stage. Here's something, sign it. And now you're under obligation or agreement to follow all of our rules. Just because this audience member did this, it's like, that's on us to fix, because that's our show. and we have to take responsibility for everything that happens on stage.
I want to underscore a theme, Tina, that you're mentioning, and that's the learning experience. You don't know if you would have, if it happened again, you would treat it in the exact same way, but you definitely use it as a case study to learn from that experience and to grow from it. So, Brian, the thing that I want to know from you, because you were my level 1 teacher, my level 2 teacher, my level 3 teacher. We talked about different ways that we can support each other up on stage. And Angelica, you mentioned really driving home the point that your scene partners made. Brian, we talked about rescuing and jumping in that hole to help your scene partner out. Brian, are these simply a matter of improv? Is this simply a part of improv that we all learn? Or is this a special code of honor that only some improvisers share and not everybody does?
Well, it is a select group. No, it's not. I mean, the yes and principle is simply going out there and yes anding whatever's been put out there. You know, somebody comes out and says this, and yeah, you're right. And also, here's some more information. It's about having your back. It's about, again, realizing that this is more of a team sport than a individual sport. And again, if you're doing this with the intent and the motives of I'm going to be a superstar and I'm going to be famous and people are going to love me.
And a lot of people start improv for those reasons, and I get that.
Yeah. Look, I'm funny, and my family thinks I'm funny, and I'm going to be super funny, and you guys are going to love me. If you got that mentality, then you're putting everyone else in a position that they have to support you, versus putting yourself in a position where you get to support everyone else. And I think that's it. I think our job as improvisers, our job as human beings, is just to support other people when we see they're in trouble, when we see they need help, when we see that things are rough for them. Let me jump in and do what I can to help. And it might not be a whole lot. It might, who knows, it might make things worse. I don't know, but I'm going to try. At least then there's 2 of us. You're not there by yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a mentality I have with this. It's not a secret. It's not a, anybody can do this. You just have to have unselfish motives. And that's what improv's about.
Our Twitch viewer, Cazador, said that maybe support includes inclusion, responsibility, understanding, and finally evolution. And the one story that I want to end with is before I finished my level 3 class at Bexar Stage, Tina, you messaged me and asked me if I was going to be showing up that night at the theater because you have a little project you wanted to do. And I said, sure, no problem. And at this point, I had never performed with Tina before. I'd never really done anything. She hasn't been my teacher yet.
Oh, I do remember this.
And when I got there, Brian, you were there. I think, Brian, I messaged you and I said, Brian, Tina asked me to do a project and I have no idea what it is. She didn't tell me and I'm terrified. And Brian, your response to that was, whatever it is that she wants you to do, I promise you, you will be completely supported by her on stage.
Brian, what a compliment you gave me via Rick.
Yeah.
I categorically deny ever saying that.
That's 2 for me, Brian. 2 for me and 5 for you.
It ended up being a group that Tina put together. She asked me to be in it, and I was terrified because it was the first time I performed with the owner and operator of Bexar Stage. But I felt so incredibly taken care of.
She's not that cool. I'll tell you from experience. Don't put her on that pedestal.
And folks, that is the end of our show. Tina on a pedestal. That's the end. I want to end right there. Yes.
I said don't. No, I've always said I think in closing, I know that we're wrapping up here, but support is really just is about teamwork. It's about whoever takes the move of making the bold initiation for here's what the next scene's going to be. Here's my idea, right? It's about jumping on board with the yes, right? The support of that and allowing that to influence your choices. Not, I think it's funnier if this thing happens, so I'm going to walk on and make the scene about me.
Yeah.
It's about supporting the initiation and the idea that the initial improviser had. And creating a space that is collaborative, right? Because that's what improv is all about. It's not just about Brian's ideas, it's about Angelica's ideas and my ideas and Rick's ideas, and all coming together to create our ideas. Yeah, I do think that that's including Cazadork, inclusion, taking responsibility for the scene, understanding each other and what we're all trying to do, and then evolving that idea into something that we all can work on together. So in that way, I do think support is all of those things. You know, because I have a lot of experience, I have been on teams before who have had that sort of mentality, Rick, that you mentioned, which is, well, Tina's good, she'll take care of everything. And I don't want it to be Tina and the improvisers. I really don't. That's not improv to me. I don't want to be on the pedestal, and I don't. And most of the higher ranking improv community members, I say this because the ranking is perception, but none of those people who you think are very good want to be good on their own, or else we do stand up, we do sketch, we do something else. Because if you think we're good at improv, it's because I think you're seeing us work really well with other people. Yeah. And that's what we want to do on stage. And that's what all good improvisers really want to do, is play well with others. And so if you're playing well with others, there's no need for it to be Tina and the Dynamos or Tina and the anything. It doesn't need to be. Don't put anybody on a pedestal. Nobody should be your star. Brian, you are not the star. Brian. And that's why one of the rules at Bear Stage is you can't name your team after anybody. Because I don't want it to be Rick and the level ones. And I don't want it to be Angelica and her buddies. It's not the Brian show. Because one of the things that we really do want to encourage is that everybody's on that sort of peer playing level. When I play with Key Party, it's not because I want to do the Tina show. It's because I want to play with Key Party to make this show happen. These are the people that I trust to create this show with. And so I think support is about being peers and being in this together. And I think bottom line, that's what we're talking about in all of those moves. Any move that you do that says yes and to another team member is support.
Yeah. Being peers, supporting, being part of that team that Angelica mentioned, and kicking that volleyball the moment that your team partner puts that in front of you to make it into the goal. Folks, thank you all for joining. Brian Scribner, my former teacher, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for that baseball analogy.
It was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one. It went completely over my head, but I loved it. It sounded really nice to my ears.
Baseball shaped nugget.
The next week is about volleyball and how you really play.
The importance of volleyball.
Next week we're starting an intramural Zoom volleyball league.
All right, I'll bring the goalposts.
Angelica, thank you for that. Thank you, Angelica, and thank you for being on the show. Thank you for your insight and your stories. Much appreciated. Tina, yeah, absolutely. Tina, my middle square, thank you for joining into this conversation. Thank you for being a sponsor of the show. You fucking rock. Thanks. Thank you to all of the Twitch viewers who are watching us live. Thank you for your comments. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much, folks. That marks the ends of our show. I want to say that things are kind of crazy right now in this world, and I don't have to tell you because you know that things are crazy in this world right now.
Wear your mask.
Yeah, wear your mask, guys. Things are crazy. Yeah, and so as we're all quarantining right now, and thinking about improv, maybe you should turn those thoughts into a little bit of action. If you're new to improv and you're not in the San Antonio area, go online, find an improv theater in your area, go to their website and give them some support. They're probably hurting right now. Yeah. If you're in San Antonio, if you've been to Bear Stage, if you like what you saw today, go to bearstage.com and there's a donate button right on that front page. We'd certainly appreciate it. Folks, again, thank you all for joining. Thank you for my panel, the Twitch viewers. And I think that's it. See you guys on Friday.
Friday, what are we talking about?
On Friday, we're talking about scene heightening. What? It's gonna be great, guys. What does it mean?
We'll find
Tune in
out
on Friday.
All right, y'all. Ooh, I
Oh,
like
nice
that.
mask.
That's a good mask.
I'm wearing my mask.
All right.
Bye,
See y'all.
guys.
Be safe.